Welcome to the Financial Architects 2026 edition. The podcast is back. I'm your host, Evan McCoskey. I'm joined, like always, by Chief Investment Officer and Partner Larry Steinberg of Financial Architects. Larry, Happy New Year. We're filming a bit later this month. Understand you took a very nice vacation. I'm going to ask you about your big trip later, but let's get to business first. I understand you guys are expanding and moving to bigger offices. How is that going?
It's not going, actually. We had a setup. We thought we had new offices leased. We ended up with somebody, outbidding us for that office, and we kind of got it stolen out from under us, And so now we're scrambling to find different offices. We got to look at more of them this week, and we'd already given notice at our prior offices, so we're kind of under the gun. But actually, that's kind of a good sign that things are moving when there's actual competitiveness for office space in the LA market, and specifically in the Pasadena submarket that was very, very much dead. And the whole concept that there's competition over office space is really a good sign, I think. So we're in a bit of a scramble mode. We're going to have to find new office. I don't think it's going to be that difficult to scramble and get another option out there. We looked at a lot we just didn't like, but that's kind of a positive that office space is actually moving, and there's a little bit of competition there, especially in LA that has been really hard hit.
Is it the right time to be expanding? Isn't the economy challenged?
Oh, absolutely. The economy is is not in good shape. It doesn't matter whether they're business or individuals. There's a lot of challenges and difficulties out there. But the reality is more wealth and more money is made in bad economic times than in good times. The main reason is that opportunities arise that weren't there before, more options open up, and there's, the ability to maybe buy stuff you couldn't get access to before or at cheaper prices. And, there's a lot of evidence that, really this is a very good time. When things are down, that's the time to be more aggressive, and that's when real fortunes can be made, and we're being aggressive in doing that right now in our expansion.
What type of opportunities are you referring to?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that, when the economy is kind of booming, the stock market just goes up, and it doesn't really matter what you buy, the whole market goes up, right? And right now, that's not true. In fact, a very small portion of the stock market, of the U.S. stock market, is driving most of the returns. And if you're not there, you haven't really been benefiting. And even if you're just in a broad market, you just are doing okay, but not that good. The fact is that right now, my strategy and our strategy, where we're not in the broad stock market and we're very targeted in the areas of the stock market we're in a lot of alternative investments, we're in a lot of alternative asset classes, and we're in some targeted segments of the stock market. Like I said, throwing a dart at the stock market doesn't work right now, but our strategy really, really is. And in 2025, we never had as big an outperformance of what we do versus the broad market than we've had in my 30 plus years as a financial advisor. So that's definitely a very big opportunity for us. Is making money in investments is more difficult right now than it really probably ever has been, especially when you kind of look at the markets in general. If you're a believer like I am that markets return to means over the period of time, the U.S. stock market has never been more highly valued than it is right now, which tells you that, it may be coming down or it may not be growing. And international has never been as undervalued versus the U.S. markets. And we're doing a lot with specific targeted international. So that's been a big beneficiary of ours. It's just that the fact is that we're not just kind of U.S. market. It's easy. We're going to buy the broad market, and that's going to lift all boats. That's been a not positive strategy in the last couple of years. And what we're doing is working, significantly better. And so that's the big opportunity for us, is people that are looking at investment returns are going to turn around, and sometimes maybe we're doing a piece for them, and they're going to want to turn a lot of the rest of their money over to us because we're outperforming everybody else that they may be involved with or they're looking at in the general market.
So that's a positive, but this has to be bad for your tax mitigation business. If people and businesses aren't doing as well, they have less taxes to pay.
There's a lot of logic to that. It's absolutely right that, the tax bills may not be as big, but if you're already kind of in a high income bracket and your income is going down, then in order to maintain your actual income, Tax mitigation, rather than focusing on business growth, may be the area that you need to go to maintain your, income level. It may become more important to keep more of what you're making, and there might be more of a reason to focus on tax savings in order to kind of offset for the lack of business or the lower amount of business than it was before. Especially, like I said, if it's down, but it's not down enough to pull you into a lower tax bracket. We're seeing people that were just so focused on business growth that they weren't worried about taxes. And all of a sudden they're coming back to us. Why? Because the growth isn't necessarily there like it was before. So what they're focusing on now is like, okay, now let's worry about keeping more of our own money. So we're actually seeing that help grow our tax mitigation business, because people that weren't as focused on their taxes before, they are now. And a lot of them are now.
So the tax business is growing. Your investment style is doing well, even if the markets are not. Is there anything you're concerned with?
There's a lot I am concerned with right now. I think there's a high degree of anxiety, and I'm not talking like just as a financial advisor and business owner, but also just as a father and just a citizen of the U.S. There's a lot to be worried about, right? We've got a significant amount of social unrest, and that isn't good for anybody. And I really kind of feel like, especially living in LA, although this is true across the country, it just seems like the last thing politicians seem to care about is like public safety and keeping people safe, right? There's just crime and violence, and that's not good. And we're really seeing this tribalization of the country into two different camps. And that's just not productive, and that's not good, because the focus becomes not on what's actually best for people, but what becomes is, my side versus your side. And, what's better or not better is kind of left behind. And I see a lot of politicians that are, taking the exact opposite viewpoint that they may have taken, 5 years ago, because now they're on a different side of it and they can politically advantage a different side of it. And they're all trying to fundraise over this. All of us in the US and all of us in the world, we have like 95% similar concerns and similar stuff. And it really drives me crazy when people are focused on the 5% maybe that we're different. And that's what they focus on. And people are fundraising off of that. But we really got to get back to what's generally good for everybody. This tribalization really has me bothered. And we're seeing that that's affecting where people are living. It's kind of like, there's no areas where people kind of debate. It's just kind of you bail out on one area and go to another where people may agree with you. And, nobody is actually having debates on what's actually good for people. It drives me very, very nuts.
So do you have a position on which side is right then?
Neither side is right, because they may be right on some issues, they're not right on others. And it's, there's also a geography component to it. And I'm not saying that, people need to compromise and go in the middle. I kind of rejected being a member of a political party after college. And that's really been the best thing for me because, really, I said this starting when I was in my 20s, and I believe it now. The worst thing that you can have is when the Democrats and Republicans agree on something. Then you're almost guaranteed that they're wrong on that, right? And so really, I think that on, a lot of the big issues that both parties get it wrong. I'm a very libertarian, less government guy. I'll be honest with that. But I think the Democrats and Republicans are each about big government. It's just about where the government allocates resources. That's the real problem for me. And like I said, I think on a lot of stuff, both parties are wrong. I think the debt needs to be addressed. I mean, in the first Trump administration, the excess spending was about 3% of GDP. And the second coming up, it's at 6% of GDP. And you can give a lot of excuses about that. But, the excess spending and the increase in debt, that drives inflation. And inflation really hurts the people that can least afford it the most, right? And so, gas prices matter, food prices matter, housing prices matter to everybody, not just people of one group or another. Both parties are kind of run by, elites that have money, and these things don't really affect them as much. And both parties seem to want to focus spending on areas that I think aren't productive. So, I think we need to get back to people looking at what the policies are and trying to make decisions based on policies rather than the politics of one idea versus another, So I think that's a big problem to me. Another thing that really drives me nuts, and that's just not just politics, but in everything, which is that, all these people think that they can be subject matter experts by watching Instagram and TikTok videos, right? So that's not just public policy, but investing too, right? I've had really smart people send me TikTok videos saying, oh, silver is going to skyrocket because central banks are hoarding it. And here's pictures of, of all these trucks loading up and pulling silver out of the vaults. And I'm just like, you're a smart guy. Why would you fall for something that full of it, right? And it makes you laugh before it makes you cry that people are actually making investment decisions based on, these Instagram and TikTok things. If any of that stuff was really true, then the people would be doing it on their own and not putting it on a TikTok video, because if an investment's going to go up 500% in 2 days, you buy it. You don't tell everybody else to buy it, right? You're the one who does it. So, and it does not just investments, it's, health policy, it's, what's going on and where there's social unrest. People all can look at these things and they need to make up their own mind and apply some logic and not just listen to what, talking heads are saying about it, because I'll be honest with you, the talking heads are usually wrong. And every time there's a crisis or something happens and everybody gets shocked and outraged and all this other stuff, if you just wait 24 to 48 hours, the reality ends up being typically a lot different than what actually happened. But nobody listens to the corrections. Everybody's caught up in the moment. I don't think that's really healthy for our society. It's got people, not focused on what our differences is, the 5% of differences we have. We all need to pull together and talk about the 95% of things that we have that are the same. And I think, a big part of that is public safety. And I think a big part of that is being able to have public debate and figure out what policies are the best, no matter what the policies are labeled, right? And like I said, a great example of that is literally, you can pull up videos of politicians, 5, 10, 15 years ago advocating for policies. And now those same policies are going to destroy the planet, right? It's that just shows a disingenuousness of the argument rather than the fact that things have really changed. So, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. I think that we need to come together as a country and we need to think more about what's better on a policy basis and what's better for individuals, rather than just what, the political parties are pushing out there as narratives in order to fundraise over. We got to get past that.
You know what you said, and it's legal now. It makes me think of gambling advisors who want to charge you to give you winners. Why don't they just put all their money on the winners themselves? No, I'm dead serious. Why do they need to run a business if they have all the answers? They can just bet it, right?
Oh, that is a great analogy. It is absolutely the exact same thing. If guys can really pick the ponies or really pick the winners in football or anything like that, then they would just do it on their own and make millions, and they wouldn't be prognosticating out there to other people. And a lot of investment people are doing the same thing. And also, I wasn't intending to talk about this, but also understand that sometimes when some of these big money managers are out there and they're talking one way on news or on TV shows or in their own, corporate, Instagram videos and other things that they're putting out on X, etc. Oftentimes they may have a direct opposite position than that, and they're trying to move the market in order to profit off of people making moves the wrong direction. And I know there's been a lot of discussion right now about whether big institutions should be allowed to own individual family homes, right? And they're pushing to have them not allowed to do that. And what they're missing is those guys already own those homes, and they're actually been selling. The big institutions that own single family homes have been selling them. So a rule or a law to be pushed out there to take that away from them at a point in time when they're exiting them anyway really feels to me like it's market manipulation, right? And I think there's a lot of that. And so a lot of times you'll see somebody come up there and say, oh, the world is ending, this is horrible, everybody should sell. And that's just because they're sitting on cash. They want to drive the market down for them to buy. Or they might be saying now is the best time ever to be selling, and they're buying, or that was the best time ever to be buying and they're selling, right? Because they want to push the market around to meet their needs. And that's not really monitored by government enough. I'm a limited government guy, but there is a role to attack people that are doing market manipulation, and they just seem to forget to do that. And, I think that a lot of that has to do with donating money and, those issues. And I absolutely a believer that the politicians should not be allowed to trade individual stocks, right? The most successful investors always end up seeming to be Congress people, right? How does somebody go from no net worth to $30 million of net worth in 1 year? Or how does somebody that's been a congressman or senator making 200 grand a year for 20 years who came into office with no money, how all of a sudden they worth 10, 20, $100 million, right? It's because the rules, they're taking advantage of them. So I'm a big believer that, being in public office shouldn't be a way for you to take, what would otherwise be illegal inside trades and benefit off of. I think all of them should be forced to have blind pools where their money is invested by people that they don't even have input on, and they don't even know what's going on, and they have very limited communication. Because if you're in public office, it shouldn't be so that you can get the inside scoop and buy stocks right before the government makes a change that makes those things go up 2 or 3 times.
So after this doom and gloom, this corrupt politicians, before we get out of here, tell me, how was your vacation? What'd you do?
Oh, it was awesome. So my daughter planned this. We were actually spent a week in Texas on a couple different exotic animal ranches, right? And this isn't Tiger King. These are all, plant eaters. And a lot of these animals, the only place they exist in the world is on ranches in Texas like this. And this wasn't a tourist attraction. This is a business partner of ours. And so, I was allowed to, and my daughter, we were allowed to just go out. It's like being on your own on the African plain out there. And we got to see all sorts of animals, like I said, that many of them don't exist where they originally came from. A lot of them come from areas that there's been civil wars and there's been famine and they're wiped out. And, these programs, like I said, it's an investment related program. So it's not a tourist deal, but you're able to see some animals that you just can't see anywhere else. And then, able to get up close and personal because we're just basically, it's like walking through the Serengeti, with my phone, taking video and taking pictures. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. My daughter and I had a great time. She got to do some horseback riding through Texas too. So it was nice. It was a really great time. I really needed to recharge my batteries. Like December was a big sprint. So this was a great time, and really enjoyed it. And I'm glad that I'm in a position to be able to take a week and just go with my daughter and go have fun together. She's 20. I'm also very happy that I've got, children that still want to do stuff with dad, even when they're past the age they don't, because she's the one who really wanted to do this trip. We planned it almost a year in advance, and it was a great time.
And how is the college search going for your high school senior son?
That's pretty interesting. He's wanting to do the sports management major, and so he's focused on schools that have that. And those tend to be SEC and Big 12 schools. It's been real interesting. We did actually go to the Tulane Ole Miss playoff game. What happened there was my son, when he got accepted to Ole Miss into the sports management part of the business school, was like, hey, Dad, they may have a first round home playoff game. If this happens and that happens, it's maybe 50-50. So just speculatively, we got a hotel and we got air flight, and we did all that before the prices shot up, and we got to go out to that game, and it was a great time, and it was a real good college experience for him. And now we've got, in February, I've got 3 different college visits, and we're going back to Ole Miss for their, accepted student day. We've got one at Michigan State, and we've got one at Kentucky. So we're a lot of travel, around figuring out which college he's going to go to. And that's really exciting, But on the other side, like once he leaves, I'm like an empty nester, and being an empty nester, maybe when you're married is one thing, but when you're a single guy, even if you don't want to be a single guy anymore, it's a different thing. Like I'm going to be an empty nester, in a matter of months, not even years now. So there's a little trepidation there, but I'm excited for him and excited that he has all these options. When I applied to college, I did it late because I had a congressional appointment to the Naval Academy and I was medically disqualified. So I applied to a bunch of schools all at the last minute, and most of them rejected me. I only got into my backup schools. And so I had a choice between 2 schools that I really wasn't excited about going to. But my son has the opposite. He's gotten into most of the colleges. He's excited about going to them, and he's really like looking at the intricacies of the differences in the colleges when we go and do these visits. So it's really exciting, and I'm very happy for him. And he's worked really hard, and he kind of had a rough beginning to high school, but he ended really strong, and he's got options. And so it's really exciting. But on the other end, for me in my life, it's kind of a little bit scary that like, okay, like once he's gone, right? And, not that I won't see him or we won't do our trips and we won't go on our baseball stuff. We go to, but there'll be less of it because he's going to be, somewhere, anywhere from half to the whole country away from me. So there's some trepidation there, but, I'm excited for him and for his next chapter. And then, I'm going to be moving into a next chapter of my life too. And that's going to be very different for me because I've been so focused in the last 20 plus years on my kids and growing them into adults and seeing them be successful, that now they're going to be kind of, to a great extent out the door and having to do it on their own. And that's going to be, a different challenge for me psychologically, probably akin to when I stopped being their coach when they went to high school and I had to be on the other side of the fence. That was a rough adjustment for me. I think this one's going to be a rough one too, but I'll figure out a way to make it through.
Well, I like the way he thinks.
Maybe I'll even find a girlfriend and that succeeds and get married again. Maybe having a little more time will make that challenge in my life a little bit better. And maybe I'll be able to finally get that done. But, it is what it is.
Well, I like the way he thinks, getting that college football playoff game visit in there. He's planning that out there, planting that seed with you. He's a smart boy. Larry, thank you so much. That's going to wrap things up for today's podcast, the Financial Architects Podcast, January 26th edition. I am your host, Evan Makovsky, and we will see you on the next episode.